I'd seen her before, of course. Hard not to, living in the duplex across the street. Her windows always carried that lived-in glow at night, lamps turned on before the sun had even fully set, like she didn't trust the dark to keep its distance. I used to pass her in the morning sometimes, when she watered the pots of rosemary and lavender lined along her porch. She'd nod, maybe smile, and I'd mumble something back, still half asleep with earbuds in. She looked like someone you wouldn't bother, self-possessed, tucked away in her routines. But then she showed up at the coffee shop I sometimes haunt. It's nothing special, just a corner place with wobbly chairs and a clock that ticks louder than it should. I was hunched over my laptop, pretending to work but really just refreshing the same page, when she walked in. Black sweater, hair pinned back loosely. She carried herself the way certain people do when they've learned how to be alone without flinching. The barista asked for her order, and without hesitation she said, "Black, no sugar." I looked up, because that was my order too. She must have felt me staring, her eyes slid over, caught mine. Not a long stare, just enough to register that she'd noticed. When she got her cup, the place was crowded, only one table left. She glanced around, then toward mine. "Mind if I?" "Sure," I said, clearing my notebook aside too quickly, making it obvious I hadn't written a single useful thing. For a while, we didn't speak. She sipped, eyes on the window. I scrolled aimlessly, pretending to read. But I kept catching details, the way she rested her fingers on the cup's rim between sips, how her thumb tapped once, twice, as if in thought. Eventually, she said, "You live across the street." I blinked. "Yeah. I've seen you around." "Of course you have," she said, with a faint smile, like the line was meant to tease but landed softer than that. We fell back into silence, though it wasn't heavy. Just two people sharing space. I don't think I realized how much I'd missed that, the ordinary closeness of sitting near someone who isn't trying to rush anywhere. At one point, she nodded toward my screen. "Do you always stare at a blank document for this long?" Heat flushed up my neck. I gave a short laugh. "Pretty much my specialty." Her lips curled, not quite a laugh, but close. "Then you're in trouble." And I like trouble. I couldn't tell if she meant it as a throwaway line or something heavier. But it stayed with me. My chest tightened, not in a dramatic way, more like a pause I didn't want to break. She finished her coffee, set the cup down neatly. Checked her phone but didn't seem to really read whatever was there. Then she stood, smoothing her sweater. "Thanks for the seat," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Anytime," I answered, and instantly regretted how eager it sounded. When she left, the air at the table shifted, emptier, somehow. I stared at her abandoned napkin, folded perfectly in half, and thought about how I never fold mine, just crumple and toss. Back home, that night, I noticed her porch light was still on past midnight. My phone buzzed once. A text, unknown number, "You looked less lost today. Don't ruin it tomorrow." I sat there, rereading it, thumb hovering but not replying. And for the first time in a long time, the silence in my apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. The next day, I caught myself waiting. Not for anything dramatic, just for the chance that she might be outside, or that I'd hear her footsteps on the porch when I came home. It was ridiculous. I hardly knew her. But the text kept replaying in my head, her words sounding sharper and softer at the same time, "Don't ruin it tomorrow." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, I found myself walking slower past her house, pausing like I had to adjust my bag or check my phone. That's when I heard her voice. "Do you always look that guilty when you're stalling?" She was on her porch, crouched near one of her planters, brushing soil from her hands. A mug of tea steamed on the step beside her. She didn't look up right away, but when she did, her eyes caught mine with a kind of ease I couldn't fake. "I wasn't," I started. "You were," she said, not unkindly. Then she gestured toward the mug. Want one? I climbed the steps, feeling absurdly young. She went inside, returned with another mug. Chamomile. Not my usual, but I drank anyway. For a while, we just sat there, side by side, watching the street settle into dusk. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but my head buzzed with all the things I didn't say. About how I'd memorized the curve of her half-smile yesterday. About how her presence felt like gravity. You know, she said at last, turning the mug in her hands, I wasn't always here. This house. It belonged to my husband. I glanced at her, surprised she offered that without prompting. He passed, she continued, voice steady but not detached. 3 years now. I stayed because, well, leaving felt like erasing him. And I wasn't ready to do that. I nodded, though my throat tightened. I didn't ask questions. It felt like the kind of truth you set down between you, fragile but deliberate. She exhaled lightly, as if shaking it off. Then, almost too casually, she said, so you see why having coffee with the boy across the street might look questionable. Boy. The word stung, though she said it with no malice. I managed a shrug. I'm not that young. Her eyes flicked to me, then away. Young enough. The air shifted then, quieter, heavier. I found myself studying the way she curled her fingers around the mug, as if holding on to warmth. I wanted to say something, to argue that the years between us didn't matter. But all I managed was, you don't seem like someone who cares what people think. That made her laugh, small, genuine. Maybe. But trouble has a way of sticking. When she rose to take the empty mugs inside, she touched my arm briefly, almost thoughtlessly, like brushing past. It should have meant nothing. But the heat of it lingered long after she'd gone through the door, and I sat there, hands in my lap, wondering if she knew exactly what she was doing. The following week blurred into late nights and early mornings, and somehow she began to thread through both. Not in obvious ways, no dinners, no long walks. Just small encounters. She'd wave when I dragged groceries inside, or pause at the mailbox if she saw me. And then, on a gray afternoon, she knocked on my door. Her arms were full of books. Do you read these? She asked, already stepping inside like the answer didn't matter. I blinked. Sometimes. Good. Then help me carry the rest. My shelves are giving up on me. Her living room was lined with stacks, neat but slightly precarious. I set the box down, brushing dust from my hands. She was already kneeling, rearranging spines, humming to herself. A melody with no words. It should have been ordinary, helping a neighbor sort her books. But the space felt charged. Too quiet, except for the low shuffle of her movements and the occasional tick of the clock. At one point she handed me a novel, our fingers brushing. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. The air seemed to thicken between us. Then, a knock on the door. Sharp. She froze, then stood quickly, smoothing her hair. Through the glass, I recognized my friend, Evan, who lived 2 streets over. He spotted me inside and raised an eyebrow. You two, neighbors now? He asked, voice laced with casual suspicion. I stammered something about helping with books. She, calm as ever, just smiled. Everyone needs a strong back sometimes. Evan laughed, but his glance lingered longer than it should. When he left, the silence in the room returned, but heavier now. You see, she said quietly, turning back to the shelves. Trouble. I wanted to argue, to tell her it didn't matter what Evan thought. But the truth was, I felt caught, like something private had been dragged into light before it was ready. She finished stacking, wiped her hands on her jeans, and sat on the couch. I joined her, leaving just enough space, though every part of me wanted to close it. Why do you let me come around? I asked finally, voice lower than intended. Her eyes lingered on me, unreadable. Then she shook her head with a half-smile. Maybe I like the company. It wasn't an answer, not really. But I didn't push. The clock ticked louder. She leaned back, closing her eyes briefly, and the room narrowed to the sound of her breathing. I stared at her hand resting on the cushion between us, fingers relaxed, open. My own hand hovered, inching closer, drawn by gravity more than choice. She opened her eyes, catching me mid-motion. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she whispered, softer than before, careful. I pulled my hand back, the moment collapsing, leaving only the echo of what might have been. It was late, one of those evenings when the air feels too heavy to stay indoors. I found myself outside, restless, and saw her walking slowly down the street. No jacket, just her sweater, arms crossed as if the night itself unsettled her. Couldn't sleep either? I asked, catching up. She glanced sideways, gave a small shrug. Sleep's overrated. We walked without aim, our steps sinking almost without trying. Houses slid past, porches, garden lights, empty swings. The silence between us was thick but not uncomfortable. Still, something simmered underneath, close to breaking. At the corner, we sat on the low bench near the community notice board. She leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching the pavement. I watched her profile instead, the way the streetlight outlined the tiredness in her face. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. Her lips curved faintly. "That sounds dangerous." "Why me?" She turned, brows furrowing. "What do you mean?" "You could talk to anyone. You probably do. But you keep letting me in. And I don't." My throat tightened. "I don't know if I'm just filling time for you, or if," I stopped there, heat crawling up my neck. The words sounded childish out loud. Her eyes softened, but not with pity. "You think too much." "I don't think enough," I muttered. "If I did, I wouldn't keep showing up here, waiting for something I shouldn't want." That landed heavier than I expected. She inhaled sharply, fingers tightening around her knees. Then she leaned back, gaze fixed on the dark sky. "My husband used to sit here with me," she said quietly. "Same bench. He'd talk about nothing, bad jokes, football scores. I didn't realize how much space silence could take up until he was gone." Her voice trembled, just slightly. She covered it with a quick exhale. "So maybe you're right. Maybe I let you in because it's easier than sitting with ghosts." The words hit harder than I was ready for. I looked down, ashamed of my selfish question. "I don't want to be a replacement." She turned to me then, really turned, her gaze sharp but vulnerable. "You're not." The pause that followed stretched too long, and yet neither of us moved. My heart beat loud enough to feel in my throat. She lifted a hand, like she might touch my face, but stopped halfway. Her fingers hovered in the air before retreating back to her lap. "If I cross that line," she whispered, "I won't be able to uncross it." The bench suddenly felt too small. The air around us tightened, holding its breath. My hand brushed against hers on the wooden slat, not intentional, but I didn't pull away. She didn't either. For a moment, we sat like that, side by side, both aware of the line blurring beneath our palms. And then she stood abruptly, breaking it. "It's late," she said, voice steadier than her eyes. I stayed on the bench long after she walked away, my hand still tingling where it had nearly held hers. The next few days, I didn't see her. No tea on the porch. No late-night walks. Her blind stayed closed, her driveway empty. At first, I told myself she was busy. Then I caught myself checking the porch light at midnight, like some kind of ritual. On the fourth night, I almost knocked. I even stood on her steps, hand raised, before pulling back. The air smelled of rain, the wood damp beneath my shoes. I couldn't bring myself to intrude. Instead, the next morning, I found her at the coffee shop again. Only this time, she wasn't alone. A young woman sat across from her, early 20s, maybe my age. Their resemblance was clear in the tilt of their faces, the same way their eyes darted when laughing. Her daughter. I froze in the doorway. She caught sight of me then, a flicker of recognition passing through her eyes, followed by something else, guarded, almost warning. She gave the smallest shake of her head, barely noticeable, and turned back to her daughter. I didn't stay. Ordered nothing, left with the weight of her silence pressing harder than any words could. Later that evening, I saw them again, through her window, laughter spilling out as the daughter gestured wildly with her hands, telling a story. For the first time, I felt like an intruder in a life that wasn't mine to step into. The next day, when her daughter's car pulled away, I thought maybe things would return. But she didn't wave from the porch, didn't call me over for tea. She just watered her rosemary in silence, eyes down, movements brisk. When she finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. She's visiting more now. Wants me to sell this place and move closer to her. I opened my mouth, closed it. Do you want to? Her hand stilled on the watering can. Some days. Other days, no. Depends which ghosts feel heavier. The words should have been an opening. Instead, they felt like a wall. I thought of all the things I wanted to say, that I wasn't a distraction, that her daughter's presence didn't erase mine, that I wanted her to stay. But none of it came out. She glanced at me then, eyes softer, but her voice firm. It's better if you don't linger so much. The sentence carved me open, even though it was said without cruelty. That night, I sat at my desk, phone in hand, typing and deleting the same message, I don't want to disappear from your life. I never sent it. Instead, I left the draft open, screen glowing in the dark, and stared across the street at her house. Her porch light was off. For the first time, it felt final. The chair beside me remained empty, and I let it. It was late again when I saw her porch light click on. A small thing, but it pulled me outside like a tide. She was standing in the doorway, sweater loose around her shoulders, holding a mug. You're out late, she said, not surprised, not smiling either. So are you. We stayed like that for a moment, her in her doorway, me on the steps at the bottom, as if there were rules about how close I was allowed. Finally, she sighed and stepped back. Come in, before the neighbors start writing stories. Her kitchen smelled faintly of lemon and soap. The sink dripped steadily. She set the mug down, leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I stood there like a guest in a place I'd been half invited to all along. You didn't send it, she said, eyes flicking toward my phone peeking out of my pocket. My chest tightened. How do you? I know the look, she cut in, quieter now. You write things you don't say. You rehearse what you'll never tell me. Her words stripped me bare. I tried to laugh, but it caught in my throat. Maybe because I'm not sure what I want from you. Or, what you want from me. That silence between us was louder than the dripping sink. She pushed off the counter, moved closer, not all the way, but enough that I felt the air shift. What I want, she said carefully, is not to regret letting you near me. And I'm afraid I already do. The words stung, but the tremor in her voice softened them. I'm not trying to take anything from you, I said. Not your memories. Not your peace. I shook my head, forcing the words out. I like who I am when I'm around you. I don't want to lose that. Her hand rested on the edge of the counter, knuckles pale. She looked at me then, really looked, and her face shifted, like something finally gave way. You're too young, she whispered. Maybe. But that doesn't make this less real. The kitchen clock ticked, steady, marking the space between us. Then, slowly, she reached out, not a dramatic gesture, just her hand brushing my sleeve, grounding me. I can't promise you anything, she said. I'm not asking you to, I answered. Her fingers lingered there, soft against my arm. We both knew it wasn't a solution, not even close. But in that moment, it felt like enough. She let out a breath that sounded almost like relief, almost like surrender. Then, with the faintest smile, she said, "Okay." And just like that, the silence in her kitchen didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt shared. The seasons turned almost without my noticing. One day the lavender on her porch browned and crumbled, the next it was replaced by small winter pansies, stubborn against the cold. Life didn't shift in a dramatic way, it just rearranged itself. I started carrying 2 mugs when I came over. Black coffee for me, chamomile for her. She'd roll her eyes and say, "I can pour my own," but she never stopped me. We never sat in restaurants or announced anything. Ours was a quiet closeness, porch lights left on, text messages about grocery runs, the steady rhythm of evening walks. The kind of routine you don't notice becoming permanent until it already is. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. Not searching, not judging, just seeing. Like she was memorizing the fact of me. I did the same. The bench at the corner became ours again. Different now, but still carrying the echo of that night we almost broke and didn't. We'd sit there in the early evenings, coats pulled tight, the silence no longer sharp but soft. She'd sometimes tell me stories about her husband, never grand ones, just small moments, the way he whistled while folding laundry, how he always mixed up the salt and sugar canisters. And I'd listen, not with jealousy, but with the patience of someone who knew the past had its rightful place. There were still boundaries we didn't name. I never left clothes in her drawer. She never asked what we were. But when she reached for my hand, she held it without apology. And I learned that was enough. One morning, as I was leaving for work, she called from across the street, "You're late." I checked my watch. 8:47 a.m. exactly. It was such a small thing, but the way she said it carried history, the morning coffee shop, the glances across cluttered tables, the silence that used to frighten me. I grinned, shook my head, and waved. She smiled back, the kind of smile that doesn't need words. We never had a declaration. No moment of, "This is love." It just unfolded slowly, like a room filling with light you didn't notice until it was already bright. And in the quiet of it, I realized that trouble, the kind she once accused me of being, wasn't always chaos. Sometimes it was staying. Sometimes it was risking the silence, and finding out it didn't break you. Now, when I sit across from her, mugs steaming between us, I don't think about the years between us, or the questions from neighbors, or the what-ifs. I think about the folded napkin she left behind that first day, neat and deliberate, like a marker in a book I didn't know I was already reading. And every time I see her fingers brush mine across a tabletop, I know exactly what page we're on.